as a growing young church. Indeed, the communion is facing challenges, but if we listen to each other and if we open up to each other, there is something we can learn from each other. And those of you who know Archbishop Rowan will know that he's a powerful speaker, he's a very, very rooted theologian. And many of us thought, yes, there is something in the North and in the church in the North that we need to take a minute and learn from. So I present these few thoughts with that in mind, that the church, the context within which the agencies have been functioning has changed and is changing, and there are challenges, but it is not dead. That is my first point. In the last 50 years, we have seen major shifts. And Rick had asked me if I could flag or project the PowerPoint, but I thought I'd just speak to it. I think we know very clearly that the agencies, whether mission or church-based, were deeply rooted in Christian faith and values. That's why we can talk about Christian aid, we can talk about Dan Church Aid, Norwegian Church Aid. They were very rooted. The mission agencies, in the values, in the principles, and in faith. But the changing context within which they operate has also influenced the changing role and identity of these organizations. From being windows and faces to the outside world, they are now no longer the only window and face and source of information from the outside world. Anna Karin will tell you that in the study we did recently for the Norwegian Mission Society, it was very clear that the information to the north is no longer a preserve of the Northern Mission Christian agencies as it was some 50 years ago, when people eagerly waited to hear the missionaries, to read the newsletters of the agencies, because that was solid, sound information. There is a bombardment of information. Membership of churches used to be very high. There were taxations in places like Germany that supported the work of the church tax. And those of you who've been supported by some of these agencies, they have also had taxation. But we have seen a process of church-state separation all over Europe. It has been taking place over a long period. And that has also impacted the life and work of agencies and development organizations. We have seen also a declining support base for these groups in terms of Christian groups in the last 50 years, where there used to be very clear support groups for mission, for development. You could turn to them. That has changed a lot. In some countries, it is a declining aged group, but also a few younger groups. Others have moved into other sectors, not necessarily supporting the Christian agencies, but supporting humanitarian work. The shift from being a monolithic society to multicultural communities, multi-ethnic, multiracial religious societies in Europe has also affected really the face of the agencies. We have seen in the last 20 years growing diaspora churches in the north. We have seen growing CSOs in the north. If you go to Sweden, you go to Norway and even Denmark, you will find organizations like Oxfam, Plan International, which have also set camp and are competing for the same resources and space with the national traditional mission and development agencies. So the space is crowded, the space is competitive and there are more actors than some few years ago. Welfare state and secularism is also a movement in Europe that has been very important in the work of these agencies. Those who come from Scandinavia, one of the things they talk a lot about is the social policy of their states that guarantees people a livelihood which enables everybody to access basic services. It is something that guarantees redistribution of resources and effective service delivery to all. Now, this has, of necessity, actually meant that the lifestyle, the quality of life of many people in the northern part of the globe is quite high. I talk about Europe in particular because the American agencies are slightly different, and I could come back to them later. So in that process and through the redistribution of resources, the quality of life, the standard of life is very high. And so over the years, I mentioned about 1,000 years, Christian values have become part and parcel of the culture of the people. If you look at the Human Rights Declaration, the UN Human Rights Declaration, it draws a lot from the Christian faith. In the same way, these values have been imbibed, and over the years, they have become humanistic and been removed from a faith perspective. So that is also an important change in the life of this. As a result of this modernism and modernization, we've seen secularism and what we have called comfort zones, where people no longer really feel the urge for faith values. They don't see the need to go out into humanitarian work with the vigor they did a few years ago. Initially, as I said, the idea, the agencies sought to build capacity to do work with us in the South, and the funding rules were not so strict. But over time, it has become very difficult. There are many books asking, are the northern agencies actually subcontractors of the state or what? So there are these issues, and there are books around it. You can read our friend Alan Fowler, who is a good writer on NGOs. We see in this leap to professionalism a human resource that is very young, very professional, very competent, but with little experience of what faith and faith communities are about. They have very little knowledge of church and the faith landscape in the global South. They are very competent professionally. They will meet all the criteria. But when they come to the South here, they don't even understand what our structures are about. So there is a kind of disconnect. And some of them actually border on unethical behavior, if you allow me. Declining church resources on the part of the global North means that in those criteria where some countries are saying you produce 20%, 10%, when they can't produce, they can't access as much resources. So that has also an impact of how much they can work with you, how much they can do together. So this criteria, you can see, confines even the amount of work they may wish to do with you. Dilemmas of identity and partnership. The first one I have raised is whether indeed the northern agencies can remain independent with their vision and missions, or whether they will continue to subcontract for their governments, and at what stage is their convergence and divergence. We notice that in this change there are moments of convergence, but there have also been serious moments of divergence. And these are issues of tension in their relationships but which also impact their partners in the South. Partnership with organizations in the South introduces a new dimension, because what William was sharing yesterday from the field visit about holistic development, we are seeing the need over the years to also professionalize our development. And in the processes of doing that, we may not have had sufficient time to think of how you professionalize and still keep the identity of the church. So in some situations, you find in some churches, development workers running with their own agenda, and it is as a result of this changed relationship in the North. The ownership of agenda setting continues to become then problematic and requiring constant negotiations and dialogue, because in the North you have to negotiate. You also then negotiate. So if CEDA says the next coming phase, these are our 8 priorities, you tune yourself into 8 priorities, and unfortunately Mwita, Reverend, cannot then come out of the 8 priorities. So the question becomes, where is the people's agenda? Most times, yes, we have actually reflected the people's agenda, but not intentionally, because the criteria, the conditionality, actually makes it very, very difficult. So we are seeing a process in the North of reclaiming space by Northern NGOs. And one is that because of the serious campaign by a few crusaders, like the Wendy's I talked about, Jones and others, the whole appreciation of religion, role of religion, is come back. And those of you who read Catherine Marshall, who was actually with James Wolfe of the World Bank, when this process, we engaged with them through the World Council with IMF to say, we do not approve the approach to development that you have. We do not approve the secularization of development. And Catherine Marshall, before she moved out, she has now begun to run a whole process at Washington, D.C. University on religion and development. And a lot of publications are coming up. So if you are interested, and influencing actually the policy thinking at that level. But all that started with the former Archbishop, George Carey and Wendy. We are also seeing, through better documentation of the work of the Northern NGOs, agencies, some appreciation that yes, they have really a place, they can make a change, they are good partners, they are potential partners, but this is an area also that they can't do without the South also enabling them to actually improve that quality. So we have gone through this in Kenya with a number of the partners, particularly with the German partners and the Kenyan partners, in really seeing how to tell the story. How do you tell the story of change so that the Northern partner is also able to show that change that is taking place, that holistic change, not just one side of the change. Lastly, in the reclaiming space, we see that the Christian agencies, some few years ago, formed what we call ACT Alliance, Action by Churches Together, which brings all the Christian development agencies and also together with the Global South Christian agencies. In fact, next week they have a meeting in Nairobi to reflect on Africa and Middle East. This is also a way of reclaiming space, identity. It is a way of harnessing their resources and together providing accountability, learning sessions for each other, giving voice, collective voice to the issues that they stand for. And this has been a very difficult but a very important process, because we can now see that by coming together, the amounts of money that ACT Alliance agencies have is a lot of money, that when they meet together and act together with their southern partners, it is possible to influence a lot of change both in the north and in the south. So partnership between north and south remains very much dependent on the contextual space in the south and in the north. I talked about changes in the south. And one of the big changes in the south is the declining space for civil society. And so that also impacts the work of the northern agencies. Finally, with the northern agencies, what next? We see that in that reclaiming space, and as I conclude, that there are 4 areas that are emerging that are critical. They are no longer the pacemaker setters. They are not in the driving seats. Rather, they are becoming accompaniers. So accompaniment becomes one of the critical areas of change in this process. They are facilitators in many ways, facilitating processes both in the north of dialogue or policy, but also facilitating the global south partners to do what they need to do. Thirdly, capacity building areas where they are filling in, assisting to fill the gaps for the southern agencies, but also recognizing the whole development scene has changed for them and for us in the global south, and therefore there are certain critical capacities that are required, both of facilitators and implementers in the global south. Finally, is new approaches of partnerships in new contexts like conflict situations, peace building areas, trauma healing areas, so that the whole area of development and mission has expanded. And I conclude by inviting you to read the document that says Mission from the Margins. This is the last mission statement of the Commission on World Mission and Evangelism. Mission from the Margins is showing that the margins are both in the north and in the south. So one of the critical changes of mission agencies and development agencies is that it is not a question of prioritizing the south only. You have pockets of poverty in the north where mission work, evangelism, diaconal work has to take place. Similarly in the south. So we are seeing north-south in the same circle where we have margins in all areas. And these margins demand a new approach. They demand a new understanding. I talked about migrant churches, diaspora churches. These are a reality. They are not integrated with their host churches. And that is raising a challenge in partnership. So I end here by saying these are just thoughts that I'm sharing with you. There are many people here with a lot of knowledge and who can speak more ably than I am. And so I just start the debate and invite you to continue. Thank you very much.